so that if any of you need to check out, or if there's somebody else who is interested in what we did, we'll have the opportunity. Welcome, guys. Good to see you. Hmm. We'll have the opportunity to post that up on our YouTube channel, and you guys will be able to see it there. So we have a relatively short agenda, so I will share with you what the agenda is looking like. We've got, I think, 5 people in the room now. I think it's a in person record for Coffee with the Principal this year. I remember when we started Coffee with the Principal online over COVID, we had 200 people. So the fact that we've got about 5 online and 5 in here means that everybody's super happy. We'll take it. Um, so the agenda for today really is we're going to go over some high level survey stuff just to let you guys know. We appreciate all of you who took the surveys for us. We'll give you some high level survey stuff, but we'll talk about how that survey stuff is guiding our actions and steps into next year. And then there's a number of topics that have not yet been decided. So we want to talk to you guys and get some feelings on that. So as we roll into the school board meeting, like I said, in about a week and a half, we can bring that perspective with us. We will address our 3 overarching LCAP goals and tell you where we want to improve the most and what we're going to do about that. Share with you guys the top priorities we have moving into next year. And like I said, talk to you about some things. We have some changes to our arts programming that's coming up, some changes to student nutrition, some changes to kindergarten, and even a discussion of a school mascot. So some really important things to bring up. So I will pull up my presentation for you guys. But before I do, are there any burning questions that you guys like walked in and said, I just want to know blank, and then I can get my coffee and leave? Is there anything along those lines? Okay. Well, as we go through, like I said, we got a very small group. So stop me at any point if you have any questions or want clarification or want some more information. But let me share out what's going here. We've got everybody out of the waiting room. We will look here. Like I said, hopefully I can remember how to get this done. Okay, get this back to where it's supposed to be. All right. Get me out of the way. All right. So as you guys may know, um, we did our surveys. We had 2 big surveys that went out. One was the California Healthy Kids Survey, which is focuses a lot on school climate. And then the other one is our LCAP survey that focuses on school climate and our goals. Those 2 surveys, we gathered up information, and as Mrs. Legge can attest, she's seen the longer version of this presentation. Got a lot of really good information out of that. The short overarching summary is that people are pleased with a lot of stuff that we're doing here at school. And when we said to them, hey, what do you consider, and this is the parent portion of the survey, we said to the parents, what do you consider to be the greatest strengths that we have here at school? We took every parent answer, used the magic of AI, and said, give me the 3 top things that parents have said that are our greatest strengths. And this is what it led into. So what you'll see is there's a feeling, and it's not surprising, we've seen this consistently before. You'll see that people are really happy about the school community. They're happy about the parent involvement, the events that we have that are tied to things. They're pleased with the staff. I feel that the staff is dedicated, and we have quality staff that's connected here. And they're also pleased that we have a safe and positive school culture. So those are the things that came out. And when you look at the same question posed to our students, our students said generally the same types of things. They said, hey, we have a supporting and caring community. That's how we want our kids to feel. They said it's engaging and a fun environment. And then, not surprisingly as well, they like probably the most opportunities to hang out with their friends and do that kind of stuff. We surveyed the teachers as well. Hey, Adriana. We surveyed the teachers as well. I didn't put theirs up here, I don't think. Let me double check, see if I kept that in there. Yeah, I did put that in there. You'll see the same kind of stuff. It's similar stuff to parents. A strong community, a good staff, and they like that whole child approach that we look. The thing that was missing here, if you kind of look at moving into our goals, is what we heard from our community groups. is we're doing a really good job on the family and community partnership side. There's suggestions on how we can improve it. And then that we're doing a good job on student wellness and supporting kids. But the thing that's been flat and the thing that you'll see as far as our big initiatives moving forward are the academic achievement goals. Because if you've been to the meetings before, you guys know that when we went through the whole COVID process, our grades kind of dropped and flattened, and they've stayed that way. And so the conversations that we've had with the board is we need to move beyond move beyond the pandemic effects, and look at prioritizing academic achievement above all else. Doesn't mean that we're not going to continue to support community things. Doesn't mean that we're not going to support community wellness, but we need to look at, from a resource allocation, how do we allocate resources in a way that we can break that kind of flat cycle? So if you look, one of the things that Mrs. Z, if you were just out at the assembly, one of the things that we did at the end was start recognizing kids that are hitting those high marks, meaning that they're getting all fours, above above standard on all of their tests. We want to not only recognize that, but we want to grow that. Because if you look at what we're dealing with as far as academic achievement, this kind of gives you the overall, this is the subjective piece of it. This is when we asked parents and we said, hey, parents and staff members and even the kids, how do you judge the quality of this educational program? And this was on a 4-point scale. So these are people that are either satisfied with it, they're satisfied or very satisfied, or they're dissatisfied with it. Like, I don't like it, or I really don't like it. You see overwhelmingly the subjective piece of saying, yeah, we have a quality education environment. The downside is, are we getting the outcomes that are reflective of that? And when you look at the actual scores, these are the ELA scores that we looked at from when we came back from COVID and they started doing testing again for the 22 year, the 23 year, and 24, which is last year. So you see the ELA scores, they've pretty much stuck here. And pre-COVID, we had a 9 percentage point gain that got us up into I think we were at 63%. So we ended up seeing this dip from that big gain that we saw back to about 50% of our kids are showing proficiency in ELA, which is terrible. It's not terrible comparatively when you look at us and you compare us across the county and you compare us across the state. We're doing better than folks in the county. We're doing better than folks in the state. A article just came out within the last 3 weeks. I believe it was in the San Diego Reader, and it was talking about small school districts and the impact that small school districts have had that have been disproportionate to others. And they ranked us within the small school districts and said, we have the highest performance of ELA and the highest performance of math out of the 10 small school districts in the county. Again, you're looking at them being below 50%. And so that is definitely not where we want to be. So one of our goals is to increase that. And one of the things that we've been doing and will continue to do in the next year is we've been working on pre-foundational skills and phonics skills starting down in our kindergarten level. So if you have a kindergartner, a first grader, I may not have made you if you want to take that one, that'd be great. If you have a kindergartner, a first grader, a second grader, you have your child's been exposed to Orton Gillingham, which you may have heard as the science of reading. And we're seeing tremendous gains in those kids and those early skills. They haven't hit this testing range yet, but they will soon. And we do expect us to start seeing this foundation being built up. Our third grade teachers are being trained now. Our fourth grade teachers will be trained over the summer, and we plan on staging it all the way up through fifth grade to grow all those skills. So we are confident that we will see some impact in that. There's some other things that we're doing in middle school to kind of restructure our middle school as well. But we do feel that we're going to see some gains in there. The more disappointing scores that we had were the ones in math. And we'll get to our needs. This aligns to survey reports as well as academic outcomes. You see this math bumping where the ELA bumped within a 2 percentage point range, right around 50% and 52%. The math one has seen a more dramatic decline during COVID and still continuing to struggle. Like we were at 47% 3 years ago, 52% 2 years ago, and dropped down to 45%. So you see this from over a 3 year span. We're down 2% over that span, and we're down 7% from just a year ago. And so this, we believe, is very much attributed. Again, these are the scores that we've kind of seen across the board. Like the state has an average that's like 30-something% proficiency. So it's not just us, but 45% proficiency in math is unacceptable. And we believe that a big part of that is a misalignment in curriculum. So if you guys have been around for a long time, you'll recall when we made the transition from what people would call regular math to Common Core math, there was a very limited supply of resources out there that were Common Core aligned. And so we went with, and with the same majority of the state, went with Engage New York, also called Eureka Math. And so the majority of the state went with that because it was the only game in town. The majority of the state still has that because the state has been trying to figure out how to realign standards. We got to the point that we are kind of done waiting for the state to figure everything out and ready to move with a new curriculum. So the one thing that we're looking at on that math curriculum is we've piloted 2 programs that were the 2 top-rated programs on a website called Ed Reports. Ed Reports is like the old Consumer Reports. I don't know if they still have it or if I'm dating myself, but the old Consumer Reports are you get on there and they give so many stars to your vacuum cleaner and you decide which one you want to buy. They do the same thing for curriculum and education. And so we were really impressed. iReady was one of the programs. They received the only perfect score in Ed Reports. Savvis and Vision was the other one, very highly rated, and is used by some other districts that are seeing good results with it. We brought those 2 in. We've been piloting those 2 right now. We are planning on making a recommendation to the school board a week from Tuesday on which one to adopt. The good news that we're seeing with them is that both programs offer a very high quality math curriculum. We're weighing out the pros and cons of each one. And then the other piece we want to look at is an assessment tool. Right now we're using the MAP assessment tool. The MAP tool does a decent job of telling us student growth over time. What it doesn't do is give us the tools to readily do things about it. So if you have a kid that's super high achieving, and they're showing that they're super high achieving, it doesn't have something built in to say, okay, here's your next step for math, here's your next step for reading. Or if your kid is missing a foundational skill, it doesn't say, here's the foundational skill and here's the practice. So we're really excited about that. So those are the things that we're looking at, starting to move in that right direction. When you look at the survey results, and we said to the parents, hey, what's the academic program that's most in need of improvement? The parents had 2 main things that came out loud and clear. One was you need a better math program. And like I just said, we knew that going in. This affirms it. They talked about a math program that has to have a new approach, more acceptable options for advanced levels, more support for struggling kids, all those types of things, and a better at-home support. So all of these things are being considered as we make that selection with the next. We did a process with the teachers as well to say, okay, what's the ideal math program that we would want to adopt? What does it accomplish? What does it look like? What does it sound like? How does it interact with our English learners? How does it interact with our families? And so when we made that selection in these 2 pieces of curriculum, in addition to the Ed Reports, we looked at that kind of vision of where we wanted to end up being. The other thing that came out was for the middle school program, there was concern that the program wasn't rigorous enough. And there was concern that as we move through middle school, we didn't kick out of the COVID check the box compliance education and more into deeper, thoughtful understanding. And so expect to see next year, we're still working through it, but expect to see next year a big realignment in middle school, both in teaching assignments, but in also how students move through and also the expectations that we have for them. So things that came up was lack of clear homework, lack of building of study skills, lack of writing. Those were all things that were resonating through, but it was tied to rigorous elements of that. So expect to see some changes if you've had kids in middle school. Expect to see some changes as we move into next year. But those are things that popped out when we talked to the parents about improving things. And when you look at staff really echoed the same types of stuff that the parents. So we do have some alignment in saying, hey, we can clearly identify what we need to work on. The staff also pointed to the math program, a math curriculum in particular, and one that does those same things that we talked about before. They also pointed to the writing support as well, trying to have some a tighter vertical articulation between what do our elementary kids need to do between each grade levels and how does that grow and progress as they get into middle school. So the current middle school schedule that we have right now actually changes the instructional day and is moving away from a longer period block day. Right now, the periods are about 75 plus minutes, and there's 4 of them per day. We're looking at moving the middle school schedule to a 6-period day that has more kind of traditional time frames, more 50 minutes. Looking to have a day that has consistency from day to day. Middle school can be very confusing. Well, it's a Monday, and it's a Monday minimum day, and it's a this and that, and nobody knows where they're going. That doesn't really help as far as academic program if there is some confusion of where you're supposed to be. And so we're looking at that, and by breaking it into those blocks, it gives us the opportunity to break it into a dedicated writing block. So pulling the writing away from the ELA so that you have fidelity in the writing program, doesn't get washed in the other ELA components. We're looking at building a curriculum that integrates subjects. So we're looking at having a humanities block, which is ELA and history taught by the same teacher, as well as a STEM block, which is showing how science and math combine together. And we're also looking at adding in a RTI block, which RTI is a response to intervention. RTI is a time of day where if a kid needs to get pulled out of the class, they can get pulled out without missing something. And if a kid needs a next step, if a kid needs a challenge, we have that built into the school day. So a lot of those things that you'll see that have been different than what we've done in the past. We're super excited and optimistic that those things are going to allow us to get to a place where we can start seeing the results that are commensurate with the efforts. Because what we're hearing is, hey, you got great staff, they're working really hard, but you're not getting the outcomes. So part of that is on us to say, okay, how do we retailer either the tools that you're using, the time that you have? And so we're excited about a lot of that stuff. So we're moving into some of those things. We talked about these academic improvements already. We expect and hope to have the board approve a math curriculum on May 16th, which is our next meeting. And the reason that we want to approve it at the next meeting, if the board is in agreement with the recommendation, is so that we can order materials, start training staff before they leave for summer, have summer training opportunities so that when our staff shows up, we have a curriculum that they're familiar with and ready to use. Unlike our current math state, our goal in this was to look at a quality curriculum that can take a kid all the way from TK through 8th grade, as opposed to having 2 separate pieces. One of the things that we heard when we were working through it is that one of the benefits of having a TK through 8th grade school is you can vertically align things in a way that you can't necessarily do when the school breaks up in different intervals. And so we looked at, can we find a curriculum that will serve all those needs? And we feel confident about the 2 on the table right now that can get us from one end to the other. I mentioned before the writing coherence and the addition of the middle school writing class, and then the middle school rigor piece and the changes to that. So those are the kind of things that we're looking at there. I want to check real quick to make sure there's nobody in there? Cool. Great.
Wait, you mean in the chat or in the room?
In the room or in the chat. We all good? Excellent. Okay. So let me just check the room really quick just to make sure we weren't leaving anybody hanging in there. No, I don't either. Okay, we'll get out of there. Yes, please do.
Well, I find that sometimes it's hard for the teachers to give kids that are kind of like maybe ahead of the group or even
Yes.
like a grade ahead. Different works that way they can keep progressing instead of kind of like being bored if they complete it and kind of.
Yes.
Having issues in class.
Mhm.
Is there a way that there can be a differentiation of what they need?
Yeah, it's a goal. It's really challenging on our current scale. And one of the things that, we encourage that within a classroom, and sometimes it's hard if you have a teacher that has, 20 something, maybe up to 30 kids, to make sure that each kid is getting what they need. What we're super excited about in the program, the iReady program in particular, on the assessment tool, is what it does is it says, okay, this is the unit that you're going to teach. And it does this on the math side, very well aligned to the curriculum if we go with that curriculum piece. But it also does it on the reading side. And it says, okay, here's a test that is going to figure out where are you at all the key standards within your grade level. And then if you say which particular standard that you're going to address, so if say, have a fifth grader and they're going to do adding of fractions or something like that, it will give you a specific grouping of all your kids within the class and say, these kids already know it. These kids are ready for it. These kids need other things first beforehand. And so what we're looking at is from both an instructional model within the class. So we're encouraging, we see it a lot more consistently at the elementary level than the middle, which is rotations in small groups. That allows you to pre-teach perhaps if a kid doesn't know certain things when they're looking to add fractions, you can work with the group on the prerequisite skills, know that the group that's ready, and then look at how do you extend or introduce something beyond. The thing that I'm excited about this is that one of the challenges has always been the lift in the classroom of, okay, how do you know that what they know? And then how do you give them something meaningful that you can kind of do this kind of juggling of different things? The iReady assessment program comes with, okay, you took this test, and they have a thing called MyPath, and each individual student has what their path is, at least through a virtual environment, to allow them to move forward. So it's exciting that it shows that kids can prove that they already have it and we don't need to waste their time, and it gives us a tool to use. The challenge we get into, Miss Legge could probably speak to it a little bit, is you get to a point where that learning so far exceeds where kids are that we look to see how can we be creative on this. So do you mind if I share your story just a little bit? Okay. Mrs. Legge has a couple of her kids that have gotten, in particular on the math side of things, and said, hey, we are at a point now where the kids in the math class are learning how to do, X, Y, and Z, and they know that and then some. And so we're kind of wasting their time. And so Miss Legge has had some of her kids go through Palomar to go through and take advanced classes and move through that kind of a thing. And it's super exciting. And I'm glad that she was the pioneer to do it, because the initial response that she probably got from both us and then the push down from the high school was, well, no, there's a normal way that this happens. And if you take all the math classes before high school, well, what are you going to do? Kind of a thing. And the final response was, well, let's figure out how to do what's right by kids and worry about the later. And so have you hit any negative consequences at high school because of all this? They're not going to say you can't graduate because you didn't do whatever.
Left to so many classes that you take during your high school year, the high school credits. But they've always been flexible and they count on the classes that they take in middle school, even to count as high school credits as well. So
Yeah.
they work good.
Yeah. Well, what I think is going to be really encouraging with a more objective and reliable and thorough assessment tool is that those conversations are much easier. It's much easier for a teacher to recognize and much easier for a parent to have that conversation to say, hey, this shows that my kid's here. What's the next step for my kid? And so I think that's going to be really helpful, because the prior tools would give us some percentile criterion-based references. Like, how does your kid compare to all the kids in the whole country? Well, it's nice to know, but it doesn't say within a certain grade level, these are the skills that they should have mastered. This will tell you that kind of information. And if your kids are mastering stuff within a grade level, it's a very logical next step to say, okay, what can we do?
So like our situation right now is that my second grader does pretty well with math, and the homework that he gets home is kind of like just busy work, just like
Yeah.
done with that.
Mhm.
I know that he can do more online.
Yep.
But maybe like, I don't know, because like then you're just giving like extra work.
Yeah, that's the thing you want to avoid, because you want to go deeper and further. You don't want to go more,
Yeah.
because it just becomes busy work.
Like, does the math packets or just homework in general have to be the same for everyone, or can they like add like a little, like an extra, like maybe 1 or 2 questions that
Mhm.
challenge that where they are testing that?
Yeah, I would say no, it definitely doesn't have to be for everybody, but it probably would require a
That's awesome.
conversation. Yeah. But here's the really good news. Like, the thing that we've heard, Mrs. Z and I, we were in a meeting yesterday, talking about this with the 6 teachers that piloted these programs. And the thing that we heard was there is so much stuff here. So there's the core program that they move through, but there is so many resources, and the resources are very readily accessible. So it's not as difficult as it was to say, I have to run down with a big book and put it on the copy machine and make like, you're just kind of clicking and pointing and printing if you wanted to. And then there's a ton to do online that can be assigned. So the other piece of them that we're looking at is teachers can assign specific things. So if there is a assessment and it says that a child is below and missing these things, that child can be assigned the things that that child needs, and then a child that is got it all can be assigned something different. So there's much easier to do it. It does take some overt step to recognize your data and take that step. And I think that would be a perfect time. It's going to be not a plug and play right out of the gate, because teachers are going to learn a little bit. But I think by the time you roll into, say, a parent-teacher conference time, all teachers will have had at minimum 2 full days of like lead instruction from the publisher, because we're building that into our schedule. So you'll have 2 full days of training. Plus, we're going to dedicate most of our minimum day Thursdays to making sure that not only, thank you, not only do are the teachers well trained in the math program, but they're also trained in mathematical instruction. Because the other piece that we are kind of missing, in my opinion, is that we have had so much turnover since not only just the whole Engage New York as a curriculum thing, but through the COVID times. If you look at the teachers that were on staff, 5 years ago compared to the teachers that are on staff now, we have probably 60% teachers that have been hired in the last 5 years. And we haven't had a robust training on how do you become a great math teacher. You know what I mean? So they've all got it in their curriculum development program, their credentialing program, but how do you do it, and what's our expectations here?
The other thing I would add to that is both the curriculums that we're looking at have embedded like performance task or centers work that does differentiate. So that type of stuff, usually teachers won't send home that higher order thinking
Okay.
stuff because they get mixed reviews from parents.
Mhm.
Like parents have, told several teachers like, my kid doesn't know how to do this. So homework should really be a spiral review, and it
Mhm.
might feel like busy work, but we want to make sure they really have that deep understanding. But the centers work where it's differentiated typically would happen in the classroom. And then like Mr. Burrows said, after parent teacher conferences, it's like, okay, they could do their, worksheet or homework and then continue on with whatever that center's work would be.
Yeah. like
And
if
that's
you're
nice
actually
because
getting
it's embedded in this curriculum as opposed to the Eureka/Engage. There
Mhm.
wasn't really anything, and teachers had to create
Yeah.
differentiated things for students.
Great question. Ray, you need some, or you just coming to?
Listening.
Oh, enjoy the coffee then. Excellent, good. Glad you're here. The next piece, do you guys have any other questions from the stuff we've been through? Okay, the next piece, I really wanted to give you guys a little preview of. These are, I would say, the hot topics that are coming before the board soon. And the board's gonna be making some decisions, but has not yet. And so the arts programming, art is a real mixed bag as far as moving from this year to next. So the bad news on the art stuff is that our SEAL program that we have was funded through COVID money. That money has expired. And so the board is basically saying, okay, can we continue that in another form? The good news on it, parallel, not about the SEAL program going away, but the good news in the arts category is there was 2 years ago, Proposition 28 that was on the ballot. You may recall it. It was arts funding for schools proposition that passed. And so the SEAL program was costing us about $130,000 to operate annually. That was fully funded through the COVID funding. The Prop 28 is about half that amount, but it gets funded annually, and there's currently no stopping date, so we can kind of predict it moving forward. The other challenge with it, as far as the money, not only is it half the money, but the Prop 28 money comes with a grant condition that it must supplement and not supplant a program. So we can't take Prop 28 money and pay for something we already have. And so the way that is being handled is the SEAL program will end up going away, but the board is considering what type of arts program to put in place. And there's really three big categories it can fall under, either in isolation or combination. And so when you look at the grant, it basically says that the grant can do visual arts, which is kind of your painting and your drawing and your sculpting and all those kind of types of things. It can do your performing arts, which is your dance and your music and your instrumental and all that kind of stuff. Or it can do your media arts, which is like graphic design, computer coding falls in that, film, those types of things. And so at the next board meeting, I don't anticipate they're going to be making any decision other than what type of program do they want to build. I can tell you that from community feedback that we got, that people were all super excited about, because we didn't pose this as a particular question, but when they talked about things that they wanted to see, was more STEMmy type stuff, more graphic design stuff, more makers studio, makers space type thing, which I believe we could put under the graphic arts piece. That was in the context, though, of looking at it as a add-on to our current program, our current SEAL program, which is very heavily music and performance art. You know, it's a lot of what you saw this morning. Mrs. Reed Smith leads those songs and that kind of stuff, and the performances that kids do. So the question to the board is, are we going to try to create something that looks different enough from SEAL that we can use the funding for? And are we going to try to backfill and make sure that we have the performing stuff that we've been doing, at least in some capacity, or moving it in another direction? And so do you guys have any real strong opinions on it? Because I'm going to bring it to the board and say, hey, give me direction on what direction, and then we'll kind of bring back a proposal as far as what that would look like. Do you guys have any strong thoughts about direction to go?
I think all arts are great.
Yeah, I do
I
too.
think the world is moving more towards the digital side.
Yeah.
But
Mhm.
that, I think any art is great.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. The one wild card on it all is the current plan right now is it does appear that Mrs. Reed Smith will go into a primary position teaching within the middle school, but will still be able to, through the exploratory classes, continue to lead that VAPA component. And if she chooses to, continue to lead the choir components and those kind of things more tied to the middle school side. And then because we are, and I didn't mention this earlier, we're adding 2 additional tracks in middle school in an effort to keep classes smaller. So for the past few years, we've had 2 6th grade, 2 7th grade, 2 8th grade classes. For the next coming year, we expect to have 3 6th, 3 7th, and 2 8th. And one of the side opportunities that that'll create is more opportunities for like exploratory classes. So classes that are typically trimester long classes that kind of extend. And we do have a coding class that falls within there, but you're really looking at a trimester for 7th graders right now. So we'll kind of see how that works. And I do believe we'll see some components of that middle school pick up arts as well, so that piece there. Next thing I want to talk to you guys about, and this has been a topic we've been talking about all the time, is student nutrition. And so we had a lot of discussion at School Site Council, a lot of discussion at the board. We've had some smaller committees. And the things that really came out were schools are supposed to have an overall wellness plan. And we had one before COVID, and then wellness took a whole new different take. And now we're bringing it back to wellness here at school. And the topics that we've been focusing on primarily, and the things that came back, we added this into our survey, was what parts of the wellness plan do we want to focus on, and what change agents do we want to look for? One thing that came through was we don't have a consistent educational message coming through, meaning there's not like a health curriculum, or there's not a time where it's dedicated. So you might have a teacher that really leans into it and talks about, brushing your teeth and eating right and all this kind of stuff, or you might not. And so we're looking at a program potentially to incorporate through our PE classes that gives some consistent level of message. The next piece that came through is that when there is messaging, there's inconsistent actions. And so those two inconsistent actions, one came through the nutrition program that we offer, and the other came through what's permitted to be brought in for like birthdays and parties and all that kind of stuff. The nutrition program that we offer, the things that came out primarily were had to do with dyes and food colorings. And so like we have like the slushy machines that we thought we were doing a great job because they were really low in sugar, and the sugars were all coming from fruits, and there wasn't a whole lot of like, it was natural for the most part, but then they had these neon red and neon whatever colors that the kids like. But I'm sure if you've been following any level of news, big topic of mandating them gone. And even if they're not mandating them gone, us looking at the steps of saying there's no need for us to be purchasing products that have that. So we did do a informal audit of the kitchen and said, okay, what are the ingredients that we have in there? And what we found is that there were dyes in the slushy stuff that we are no longer ordering, so we're able to move that kind of stuff out. We're seeing that the food nutritional program is compliant with all the regulations, but those regulations don't have real clear parameters around sugar content. And so you'll see kids like with like, I don't know, Lucky Charms cereal or something like that they can buy for breakfast, like these kind of things. So we're looking at how can we have a program that kids will still want to access it. We don't want kids going hungry, but also make sure that what they're accessing is as healthy as it can be. So that's one side of it. The other side of it, and I'm interested in your guys' opinion because it's all over the place. We talked at School Site Council, and we really had 3 different camps on how to handle like birthday cookies and treats and cupcakes, because one of the reasons that this started up again was a parent saying, hey, I don't do cupcakes with my kids at home, and they got cupcakes every single day that they were at school. Like, and the research shows that all the sugar is not good for kids either in the moment or long term. And so what's school going to do about it? And so we've been having really positive conversations. We've gathered a lot of information. Do you guys have particular opinions? Because you've all been here long enough to know that, kid has a birthday and they bring in cupcakes the size of their heads. So you guys have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, it was funny because I would mention to my husband, was another cupcake.
Yes.
Always.
Yep.
Then at the beginning of the year, you guys came with like no sugar, and I was so happy.
Yep.
And then when I expressed that on my group of friends, they were pissed.
Yes.
So I'm like, okay,
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So It depends who you talk to, I guess.
Yes.
You know, I really like it, you know, like, you know, cupcakes, I
Yep.
like it. There are ways of like doing a birthday party with not, you know, not
Yes.
that type of stuff, you know?
Mhm.
But then you're never gonna make everybody happy.
Yeah, we know that that's not going to happen. That we know we're not going to get agreement. It is good to hear it because your experience is our experience. There's a combination of tradition. This is what's always been done, and then there is well, I don't want to do it for my kid, but other kids do it, and so now I feel like pressured to have to do it, and so there's those types of things. And we had a really good discussion within school site council about the setting of parameters of what types of food, and we never really landed with full consensus, but it was getting around the idea of let's define what healthy snacks can be or acceptable snacks can be or non-food alternatives, either trinkety things or activities, like let's start redefining that as we move forward. I can tell you when we had this conversation with staff, we also had the same mix. There were some that said, I'd just soon do away with it. Others that said, well, let's limit it to 1 day a month. And others that said, I love it and let's keep doing it. So it's all over the place. So we're, like I said, we told the board that they approved the wellness plan that had a lot of guidance for being healthy, but no real ultimatum for being healthy, or real clear board, red lines as far as what you can and can't do. And the plan when we did that back in January was we'd like to bring it to you before the start of the next school year so that we can do some messaging to the school community, especially if there's going to be a change in practice. And so my guess is we'll probably have that meeting in June, that decision in June, and be able to message some stuff over the summer and before the school starts. Yeah.
Perspective, have you maybe a survey of like, if we were to do away with birthdays, parents just leave it to the teachers? Would you be on board, neutral, or against? And I know like we've had lots of surveys.
Yeah.
I feel like feel out, like personally, I'd be like, whew.
Yes, I would too as a parent. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
Where it's up to the teachers.
Mm-hmm.
That would be a relief, or if parents would be like, no way, and maybe just feel out.
Yeah.
And we didn't do a survey like the one you're suggesting, but we did add a few questions regarding sugar as part of the LCAP survey.
Mhm.
And that's kind of the feedback we're sharing right now, was like it was a little bit of mix,
Mhm.
like, and that's what we get with everybody.
Yep.
So it's really about whatever it is to be clear on this, because we
Yeah.
won't reach a consensus. But one thing that people did share was that we wanted more education to our students about health standards. So we already, there's a free education for the state of California.
Mhm.
And we're in the process of obtaining that and working with Ms. Hampton, the PE teacher, to add that to some of the PE time.
Mhm.
I'm on the other side, like, I like the birthday treats.
Yep. Yeah.
But I do think like, it should be a size thing, like, you can't bring in like a regular size cupcake, maybe just like those little tiny ones.
Or maybe once a month.
Yeah, like
then
put all like the March birthdays in
March
one
birthday,
day.
like 1 month, because you're never gonna be able to take all the sugar away from the kids anyway, you know, you present them two things, they're going to get the sugary things, you know, I mean, it's natural. So I guess once a month, maybe, you know, like you would,
I guess it depends on how many kids are in the class.
that's true too, you know.
Like if you have like more than 5 kids, maybe break it up into like the first week and then the last week, or,
Yeah.
you know, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It's gonna be, there's gonna be some folks that are not happy. Yeah.
With their children.
They
just
do.
want to celebrate, but I think that the whole thing is trying to figure out what to supplement with, like maybe instead of like a birthday treat, like a birthday game.
Yeah.
And that's
Mm,
during, with our meetings with the wellness, with the school site council, we designed like a flyer, a pamphlet really that shows kind of all the things you could do in lieu of sugary treats. Like there's fun, healthy snacks to do. I know someone in fourth grade brought in like berries and whipped cream and popcorn and things like that. And then there's non-food treats too, like extra time out at recess. So we have a whole kind of draft flyer if we move in that direction of other ideas with teacher approval and connection.
I think every time there's a birthday comes up, that teacher can send it to that parent, like, hey,
Exactly.
if you want a different option,
yes.
that just kind of, just that. Always.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, it's going to be a tricky one. And normally I can predict the direction these things are going to go, and I'm not sure about this. We did have a question in the chat that had to do with federal government actions and federal government funding. So I'll sort of hit that right now and answer any questions that you have. You guys may have seen that there have been a lot of executive orders from the federal government that have had some impact or potential impact as far as schools. One of those, I'll kind of hit the two big ones, and then if you guys have any questions about it, or the three big ones. One of those had to do with the Federal Department of Education. And so there was executive orders that were looking at either reducing or eliminating the Federal Department of Ed. And there was a lot of worry as far as how that's going to impact us. I know that there have been reductions in the Federal Department of Ed. We have not currently seen any outcomes to that, negative outcomes to that. What we do expect is that the Department of Education, at least on the federal side, about 3% of our school budget comes from federal dollars. So 3%, not a whole lot, but 3% is a lot to us. Like you kind of look at that money. So about 3% of our budget comes from there, as well as our entire nutrition program, because like lunch is for free for everybody, and the feds currently pay for that. What we do expect at some point in time is there's not any indication that they are cutting the funding, but if they cut too deep into the processing of the funding, there might be delays. And so that's what we're seeing. And the board passed a resolution at the last board meeting that was talking about maintaining adequate reserves so that we could cash flow if that funding is slowed down. So that's what we're looking at. The federal government doesn't provide us a whole lot of direct services. So it's not like they're doing something for us that they're not. But like I said, that funding component is a really big one. The second thing that's tied to funding is the federal government had an executive order a while back that basically said that all schools in the country have to certify that they're not doing DEI stuff. And if you're doing DEI stuff, then we're going to take away all your money. And so California, as well as a number of other states, responded and basically said, we have inclusive school environments. We've certified that we have inclusive school environments. And the federal executive order didn't define like what the stuff is you shouldn't do. And so they said, we've already certified it, so we don't need to recertify it. And that has kind of stayed right now. There is some lawsuits back and forth on who's supposed to say and do what, but no money has been affected on that either, at least in California. So a lot of uncertainty, a lot of fighting. I'm just hopeful that it doesn't hit us in a way that is either going to force actions that we don't want to do or remove funding that we rely upon. So far, not a whole lot as far as the impact, other than a whole lot of people worried about it. The third thing that came out, and this was a few months ago, is there was, and this is a non-fiscal thing, there was an order from the federal government that basically took away essentially the sanctuary status of schools and hospitals, and they call them sensitive sites, to immigration enforcement. And so that caused a lot of concerns, especially within certain parts of our school community, of are we going to have immigration agents doing enforcement actions here at the school? At the time, we basically met with a whole bunch of folks, shared with them what our board policies were, reaffirmed those policies with the board. And those policies essentially say that there are very limited conditions by which law enforcement can do action here at school, including immigration action. And the immigration action even has more specificity to it that's tied more towards a specific type of warrant issued by a specific type of judge. The good news is none of that has affected us in any way. There has been one report, and it's really difficult to get accurate information on it because it's such a political issue. It's hard to kind of wean through it. There was something that happened in a school up at LA where there was some level of law enforcement, possibly immigration action that the state officials condemned as far as, you know, you're creating unsafe schools type of thing. I've tried to get like the objective piece of it and have never. So it's really two sides to a coin. But I can tell you it creates a lot of fear in our school community, even though it hasn't had any direct impact. We have been fortunate in that other schools have seen dramatic decreases in kids and families willing to come to school because of that fear, at least initially. We didn't see that similar drop off. So we had a couple days where we saw lower attendance that we attributed to that, but nothing sustained. So those are kind of the three biggies that are coming from the Fed. So kind of stay tuned for the most part. But any questions on those things? All right, let me look in here real quick. Okay, I think we're good on our questions. Yep, I think we've answered all of those. So the next thing I wanted to bring up to you guys, and I'll bring it up both for our friends on the Zoom and our friends here. Does anybody have any kids going into kindergarten this coming year? Okay, so I'll ask this question of you because you may have seen the survey that came out. So at our last board meeting, our kinder team, and we've been talking about this for a couple of years, but the kindergarten team made a presentation to the board that was talking about essentially a transitional start for kids. So not the transitional kindergarten, not the TK, but to look at how we roll kids into kindergarten. And there's local school districts, Poway, Rancho Santa Fe, there's another school by the coast that have varying levels of a delayed full day start. So what that means is that the kindergartners, and if you guys have been around the school for a long time, you know that we used to have kindergarten got out at 1:30 every day. And that was the dismissal. And then there was a discussion, again, driven by the kindergarten team. Hello, Assistant Principal Mayberry, come on in. We had a discussion by the kindergarten team basically saying this is as TK was growing. The expectations for kindergarten academically have become what used to be first grade. And by having kids leave at 1:30, you are creating a dynamic in which you're not allowing play and exploration time because you have so much academics you need to get to. And if you extended that day, you can have a more balanced day for kindergartners. And so the board made the decision to say, okay, we're going to take kindergarten from 1:30 to 3, but we're going to keep TK at that 1:30. And so TK's grown to a full, next year it'll be a full standalone grade. Everybody within that whole year span will be in TK. But for kindergarten, they were saying they love the full day. They love the 3 o'clock, but what they don't love is that early part of the year. And a lot of schools have said, okay, somewhere between 2 and 4, the first 2 and 4 weeks, those kids come and they get released at 1:30, and they can use that time to do kindergarten assessments of kids. They can do some additional work with some handful of kids, like the teachers are still available to do that, but it doesn't overtax or overburden the kids as the school year starts. We did a survey on that, and the survey, it's really interesting because the survey almost exactly fell in 4 quadrants. So the 4 quadrants were, this is the best idea I've ever heard, to this is the worst idea, how could you even consider this? What was interesting within the survey, though, is that most of the survey results that we saw had a predictable reason for not liking it. So the ones who liked it said, yes, this makes a lot of sense. It gives kids this time to sort of transition into this full day. It creates an environment that, will promote more success later because you're not sort of pushing them too far, kind of a thing. The folks that didn't like it, some of them were saying, hey, my kid's in TK and stays till 6 o'clock at night because they're already here for kids club. They can handle it, kind of a thing. But most of them said this would create an undue burden from a childcare standpoint, whether it's a sibling or whether it's a work schedule or whatever. So we're kind of looking the board will make this decision, it's up for a board decision at the May 16th meeting, but we're looking at seeing, do we have the ability, and I think we do, to provide an option for families that say, hey, I need my kid to be here until 3 o'clock, kind of a thing. So, Mrs. Carson, what's your thought about the 1:30 versus the 3 for, they had proposed 4 weeks, I think, the first 4 weeks of school.
You answer my question just based on the surveys, because a lot of, with the childcare aspect, currently my TK student is in after-school childcare until 3, so she.
Yep.
is staying all day. A lot of those TK kids, there's a good amount of TK kids who do already stay all day.
They do.
Families would probably like, well, our kids are fine, so, but there's a lot of those first time, like the older kids. I fall in whatever's best for that transition and what's best for the kids as a whole.
Yeah.
Keep the kids first.
Yeah.
And then having an option for families who need it, whether that's white glove for just 1 month or other options.
Yep. Yeah. So if you guys are on the Zoom, the gist for Mrs. Carson was, let's make this a student-centered decision, but be considerate of families that may be burdened by it. So, yeah. Any other thoughts on that? Yes, I do too. Uh-huh. Yeah. Well, it's really difficult. If you think of anybody who has a regular job, to come at 1:30 is really difficult if your job has traditional hours to it. Yeah. 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 And like I said, we have some thoughts. We have to just make sure that the people we have in mind will actually do it. But we have some thoughts how we can make that work. And then the very last thing that we wanted to bring up with you guys, and this is the super important question, is we had middle schoolers who were working within their SEAL component of saying, okay, if you were to design a school, ideal school, what would it be? And then that conversation kind of went, okay, in your ideal school state, what can we do to make it happen here? And so one of the things that has come up from 2 different groups of kids was to put a school mascot at San Pasqual. And so we've been the San Pasqual Saints for forever. And so when they brought up the school mascot idea, they were saying, well, we're still gonna be San Pasqual Saints, but we want to have somebody dressed up like in a costume and be at the games and at the, the SOAR rallies and all this kind of stuff to bring more school spirit. And so it's really cute. These 3 middle school girls, 3 7th graders, they came to the office. They had a full proposal, PowerPoint slide presentation. They had a cheer that they did for us. That was going to be, and we encouraged them to come to the school board and say, hey, school board, have any interest in this? And so they came, they did the presentation to them. School board seemed receptive to them. They were very appreciative of them coming in. And so we are going to push out a survey to the school community to see what people kind of think. That'll probably go out Monday. And then we'll run that for about a week. And then we'll just have some information to see, is it a handful of kids that want this? And do we still want to do it? Is there a want or desire? And I can show you, this will be, I don't see my share screen anymore. I was going to show the presentation. There it is. Yeah, because I can show you the graphics that were proposed.
And what was really nice about their presentation was they really kept in mind what we currently have as far as Saint Soar and all the new murals around campus. So they didn't want to mess with that. They wanted to make sure to keep that in mind, that that's what we say, but also highlight kind of the area. And so they were really thoughtful about it.
Yeah. So these are two proposals independently. Like there was, I'm sure there was discussion like among groups, but the one on the left was one version of what the girls were talking about, and they thought that our mascot should be a hawk because we have hawks all around, and because we're Saint Soar, they would soar, and the hawk kind of shaped like the fleur-de-lis thing, and so they had a lot of thoughts about that kind of thing, and so that was their thinking of having.
Yeah, they even went so far as like a lot of our students head on to San Pasqual High School and talked about that they're the Eagles. And so we're kind of like, you know, they wanted it to kind of stay in tune with that, which I thought was really thoughtful.
Yep. And then another student came up to me and he said he thinks we should have the soaring saint, and it's a bird of some sort. But the thing that I was really pleased is that the kids are thinking of some things that quite honestly can bring, can bring school spirit, can bring connectedness to kids. Mascots are super controversial, so I'm super glad that they're picking animals because there's schools that are in and out and all sorts of things as far as what they represent or don't. And so we'll have a discussion on it with the board. Do you guys have strong feelings, one or the other, on if we should have one, and if so, a direction to go?
All the sports are in middle school, right?
Yeah, they're middle school, and many of them are tied more to 7th and 8th. We are looking though, Nicole's been having discussions with the new owners of Dos Osos, the golf course across the street, and looking to try to put some sort of a golf club or some golf thing together that could incorporate younger kids, because a lot of our when we have groups like this, what we hear from a lot of folks is, hey, there's a lot of stuff for middle schoolers to do. There's not as many things for our elementary kids to do. So the elementary is like, there's they do the garden club stuff, and we just started a writing club that kids are participating in. But when it comes to actually like competitions and stuff, like there's nobody to play in the elementary. And we have we're in a league with a bunch of the private schools and the charter schools. So we actually have like competitions we can do, but that usually gets space driven. And so it tends to be mostly 7th and 8th. Some sports we can do 6th. And we have had sports when we haven't had a lot of participation that we've actually brought in 5th graders and played sports, but it's usually pretty crowded, which is good. It's good.
And I would add just, sorry, I missed the last part you said, but with regards to the golf, I don't know if you guys have seen on their Instagram, they are going to start golf camps for the community this summer. So Dos Osos is starting that. And to any student that attends our school, they're giving a 20% discount. So, and I believe they've opened it up from 1st grade on up. So it's limited to about 6 students per camp, and there are several different sessions to choose from. So my thought is they'll take whoever joins the camps as an idea if they want to move forward with like something next year, if they're getting a good turnout from our school community, which I anticipate they will. So I'm really excited about the relationship, because the prior owners, I tried to start something when I took on this role 3 years ago, and it was kind of always fell on deaf ears. So I'm really excited that they're amenable to these golf camps and giving our community a discount. So I'm hopeful it expands sports for our younger students.
Yes.
I love that the students have a passion project like the mascot.
Yep.
Did they offer any suggestions to who would be in the costume?
Yes. They didn't reveal, but what they did, which was funny, is they surveyed a whole bunch of middle schoolers and said, hey, do you think we should have a mascot? And they had 75% of the middle schoolers in their survey were in favor of doing a mascot, with one of them actually signing up to be the mascot. Yes. Yeah. So I would think though, I'm less concerned about getting somebody to do it and more concerned about what they do when they're in the costume. That's my bigger concern of what the mascot does. Funny, my daughter was at one of the high school games. I don't know how she got roped into it, but she was the Eagle at one of the games. So I was at San Pasqual High School football game, and she said that that costume was the most foul smelling thing that she's ever put on. So that would be the other cost involved as far as costume and costume cleaning. So that's all the stuff I had to present. Do you guys have any questions on anything? I really appreciate you coming in, and this information is super helpful for the conversations.
This is going back a while. If we were to change the schedule for middle school, when would those decisions be made and kind of rolled out? Would that be at the beginning of next year for students?
I expect us to have it in place before we leave this year. We have a working draft right now that I believe is going to be the schedule. There's probably some tweaks to it, but we have looked at how we're going to stack it as far as sort of credentials and board objectives, as far as looking at the goals of this academic achievement. And so the way it's currently structured is structured in a way that can be done with the staffing that we have and hits those board goals. Thank you. So I believe right now, like I said, if the draft holds, it's a schedule that has those 3-3-2 groupings. The class sizes for 6th grade and 7th grade are currently very small. They're in the low 20s because we've broken it up 3 ways. And within that, it has similar components to last year, in that it has an exploratory class 2 days a week, has PE 2 days a week, but it does add in a writing component 4 days a week. No, not 4 days, 3 days a week. And it adds in a RTI, like a intervention, 2 days a week. And then it has classes meeting, all core classes meeting for 50 minutes every day. So like you look at your ELA, your history, in most cases, actually in all cases for ELA history, grouped as a humanities. So the same teacher teaching those two. And then the STEM groupings are in 6th grade and into 7th grade, part of 7th grade, where you have the same teacher teaching the math and science together. As you get older, so as they get some 7th and all of 8th, you have the math and the science that are bifurcated so that they're their own, but you still have the humanities. And so that's how we expect it to be. I expect it'll be solidified, if not before the end of the school year, at the June board meeting. So before we hit the long part of summer.
So they wouldn't need classrooms every 15 minutes? You would keep them together 2 times 15 minutes?
They would potentially move. So yeah. Yeah. Right. Well, what we were seeing was the blocks were so long that teachers were building breaks in the middle that were far exceeding the 3 minutes it would take them from walk to one point to the other. So within this schedule, probably about half the time they're connected into the same teacher, like so they're staying for that. But there is a 3-minute break in the middle that they would have. That's for some passing. But what we found is that those blocks that the high school is moving to create a lot of dead instructional time. So what'll happen is the teacher is teaching concept A, and then, okay, now spend the second half of the period working on it. And there's not a lot of instructional stuff. And so what we're trying to balance it with is more purposeful instructional time, still having time to practice, because we're building in the current schedule also has a homeroom period at the end of every day instead of at the beginning. Our intention is to have all students with planners or agendas and they use that time at the end to make sure that their assignments are written down that they have to do, that their grades are checked. And then also build in a regular homework expectation component. Because the other thing that was happening is there would be a math lesson that was taught, and then it was like, okay, just do the math lesson. And then there was never any extension beyond the classroom. There was a lot of wasted time, at least observationally. And so I think that might work for the high school, especially since they've got to travel so much further to get to classes. But I think our kids will be better served by a transition back. It does seem in education, you just kind of see this back and forth depending on needs.
I do think it's also the feedback from students as well, like the block schedules seem way too long for students, and they've shared that with us that it just, I think for the high, and I would say my high schooler also says she hates the block schedule, but at least they're you know, more mature to sit through it as opposed to our middle school students who are mature, but maybe could benefit from a shorter time frame.
Well, I think we give them for classes every single day.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay, well, missed science, so when are you gonna, make sure, you know, you go to that teacher and get what you missed, he's like, oh, well, I'll see her in like 2 or 3 days. I'm like, no, you'll go in between 2.
Yes.
You
Mhm.
know, so I think having consistency, the daily consistency.
Yeah. Sounds good. All right. Any other questions? I don't see any with our Zoom room or in the room. You guys have any other questions on anything? I do appreciate you coming in. Like I said, our upcoming board meeting on the 16th will have a lot of topics. So if you want to take a look at that, it'll get posted the Friday before. And if there's things you want to come share directly to the board, we encourage you to do that. But they'll be making a lot of decisions over these next 2 meetings that I'm confident will have really positive impact on the kids. So, all right. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you all in there. We appreciate it, guys.
Thank you, Zoom room.
Yep, I don't see any final questions, so we're gonna head on out. If you guys missed anything, we will post this on our YouTube channel. And please don't hesitate if you have anything you want to talk to us directly about to reach out. Thank you very much. You guys have a great day. Bye.